Survival Mode by Alicia Lynch. Chapter 2. Subtle Signals. Recognizing Overlooked Signs. The human body is a remarkable communication system, constantly relaying information about our internal state. Yet, in our fast-paced, externally focused world, we often become deaf to its subtlest whispers. We are adept at recognizing overt signs of distress, a loud cry, a visible injury, an outburst of anger. However, the silent language of the nervous system, especially when it's struggling to maintain equilibrium, is frequently overlooked. This is where the concept of the invisible load comes into play, the constellation of often unnoticed physical sensations that are, in fact, profound indicators of nervous system dysregulation. These are not dramatic events, but rather the persistent hum of discomfort that becomes so normalized it's often mistaken for simply how things are. Consider chronic muscle tension. It's a common complaint, often dismissed as a consequence of long hours at a desk, poor posture, or general stress. But for many, this tension is a vigilant guard, a physical manifestation of the autonomic nervous system being perpetually primed for action. The sympathetic nervous system, our internal alarm system, interprets even minor stressors as potential threats. In response, it triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which prepare the body for fight, flight, or freeze. This physiological preparation involves a subtle but persistent tensing of muscles throughout the body, the shoulders hunching, the jaw clenching, the neck tightening, the back stiffening. Over time, this chronic bracing becomes a default state. We might not even consciously feel the tension anymore. It's simply the background noise of our physical experience. The individual may feel a constant, low-grade ache in their shoulders, a tightness in their chest that they attribute to poor breathing, or a persistent knot in their stomach. They might find themselves unconsciously grinding their teeth at night or experiencing frequent headaches originating from the neck and shoulders. This isn't just discomfort, it's the body's way of saying, I am on high alert, ready to defend myself, even when there is no apparent danger. The invisible load here is the energy expenditure and the physical toll of maintaining this state of muscular readiness, a constant low-level activation that drains resources and contributes to feelings of fatigue and irritability. Digestive issues represent another significant, yet often downplayed, aspect of the invisible load. The gut and the brain share an intricate, bidirectional communication pathway, often referred to as the gut-brain axis. When the nervous system is in a state of dysregulation, particularly when the sympathetic nervous system is dominant, blood flow is diverted away from non-essential functions, including digestion. The body prioritizes immediate survival, putting processes like nutrient absorption and waste elimination on hold. This can manifest in a myriad of ways: bloating, indigestion, irregular bowel movements, constipation or diarrhea, nausea, or an overall feeling of unease in the stomach. For someone experiencing chronic stress or trauma, these digestive complaints can become a daily reality. They might find themselves constantly battling heartburn, experiencing unpredictable bouts of cramping, or feeling a perpetual sense of fullness or discomfort. These symptoms are often misunderstood or misdiagnosed, leading individuals to seek solutions for the symptoms themselves without addressing the root cause, the dysregulated nervous system. The invisible load is the constant, uncomfortable churning in the gut, the anxiety that flares up when considering eating certain foods, or the social avoidance due to unpredictable digestive distress. It's the body's internal machinery signaling that it cannot perform its vital functions effectively because the nervous system is preoccupied with perceived threats. Fluctuations in heart rate and breathing patterns are also subtle yet powerful indicators. When the sympathetic nervous system is activated, the heart rate typically increases, and breathing becomes faster and shallower. This is designed to deliver oxygen rapidly to the muscles for action. However, in a state of chronic dysregulation, these responses can become erratic and unpredictable. An individual might experience sudden, unexplained palpitations or a racing heart when there's no physical exertion or apparent reason. This can be deeply unsettling, leading to anxiety about the palpitations themselves, creating a vicious cycle. Similarly, shallow, chest-based breathing can become habitual. The body learns to operate with a suboptimal oxygen supply, which can contribute to feelings of anxiety, lightheadedness, and fatigue. Individuals might describe a persistent feeling of not being able to take a full breath, or a tightness in their chest that isn't directly related to muscle tension. This is the nervous system attempting to keep the body in a state of readiness, often at the expense of calm, efficient physiological functioning. The invisible load is the unsettling sensation of an erratic heartbeat, the constant subtle ache of breathlessness, and the accompanying fear that these physical symptoms might signal something more serious, further fueling the nervous system's alarm. Persistent, unexplainable fatigue is perhaps one of the most ubiquitous and misunderstood signs of nervous system dysregulation. It's not the fatigue that comes from a single night of poor sleep or a strenuous workout. It's a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that no amount of rest seems to alleviate. This chronic fatigue is the body's natural response to prolonged activation of the sympathetic nervous system. The constant state of high alert, the muscle tension, the elevated heart rate, the digestive disruptions, all of these require an immense amount of energy. When the nervous system is chronically stimulated, it is essentially running on fumes, depleting the body's resources at an unsustainable rate. This can lead to a pervasive sense of exhaustion that impacts every aspect of life, making it difficult to concentrate, engage in activities, or even perform simple daily tasks. The invisible load here is the feeling of wading through treacle, the struggle to muster the energy to simply exist, and the accompanying frustration and self-criticism when one cannot keep up with perceived demands. It's the body's desperate plea for respite, drowned out by the societal pressure to be constantly productive and energetic. Beyond these more commonly recognized physical manifestations, there are other, even more subtle internal sensations. A persistent feeling of being on edge, a hypervigilance that makes one jump at sudden noises or movements, a sense of unease that settles in the pit of the stomach. These are all whispers from a dysregulated nervous system. Individuals might report a constant sense of dread or anticipation, as if waiting for something bad to happen. This is the nervous system's threat detection system working overtime, scanning the environment for potential dangers. It can lead to difficulty relaxing, even in safe environments, and a feeling of never being truly at peace. This internal restlessness is the invisible load of a nervous system that cannot find its off switch. Consider also the experience of feeling disconnected from one's body, a sense of being detached or floating. While this can be a more pronounced dissociative symptom, a milder form often presents as a subtle detachment from physical sensations. The body becomes something that is merely a vessel, rather than an integrated part of one's experience. This can manifest as a diminished awareness of hunger or thirst signals, a lack of sensation during physical activity, or a general feeling of being outside oneself. This detachment is a protective mechanism, a way for the nervous system to create distance from overwhelming or painful experiences. However, when it becomes chronic, it contributes to the invisible load by fostering a sense of alienation from oneself and one's physical reality. The skin can also betray the state of the nervous system. While not always recognized as such, skin sensations like itching, prickling, or an increased sensitivity to touch can be linked to nervous system dysregulation. These can be manifestations of the body's heightened arousal state, where sensory input is amplified or misperceived. A constant, low-level itch that cannot be attributed to any dermatological cause, or a feeling of pins and needles under the skin, can be the body's way of signaling that it is in a state of heightened alert, with its sensory processing systems running on overdrive. Recognizing these internal sensations is the crucial first step in understanding and addressing nervous system dysregulation. For too long, these signals have been dismissed, ignored, or attributed to weakness of character. By bringing attention to the invisible load, the chronic muscle tension, the digestive unrest, the erratic heartbeats, the persistent fatigue, the hypervigilance, and the subtle bodily disconnects, we can begin to validate these experiences. These are not figments of imagination or signs of failure. They are the legitimate, albeit often subtle, language of a nervous system working tirelessly to navigate perceived threats. Acknowledging these signals is an act of self-compassion, a radical acceptance of one's biological reality. It is the beginning of a journey from self-criticism to understanding, from trying to push through, to learning to listen and respond with care and wisdom. This shift in perspective empowers individuals to move beyond simply enduring their symptoms and towards actively supporting their nervous system's innate capacity for healing and balance. It is in truly seeing and feeling this invisible load that the path to reclaiming a sense of calm and resilience begins to emerge. When the nervous system is under prolonged duress, the effects are not confined to the physical realm. They deeply permeate our cognitive landscape. We often associate the fallout of trauma, chronic stress, and anxiety with heightened emotions or physical exhaustion, but a significant and often incapacitating consequence is the phenomenon known as cognitive fog, or more clinically, impaired executive function. This is not a matter of intelligence or inherent capability. It is a direct physiological response to a system that is perpetually on high alert, struggling to allocate resources effectively. The once sharp edges of our thinking can become blurred, making what were once simple mental tasks feel like navigating a dense, disorienting mist. At the heart of this cognitive disruption lies the prefrontal cortex, PFC, the brain's command center responsible for a suite of crucial executive functions. These include planning, decision-making, impulse control, working memory, and complex problem-solving. It's the part of the brain that allows us to focus, to filter out distractions, and to engage in goal-directed behavior. However, the PFC is particularly sensitive to the body's stress response. When the sympathetic nervous system is chronically activated, flooding the body with stress hormones like cortisol, the PFC can become impaired. This isn't a conscious choice or a failing, it's a biological trade-off. In a perceived state of emergency, the brain prioritizes immediate survival functions, those governed by the more primitive parts of the brain, like the amygdala, the threat detector, and the brainstem, responsible for basic arousal. Resources that would normally be directed towards sustained attention and complex reasoning are diverted to managing the perceived threat. This leaves the PFC in a compromised state, leading to a cascade of cognitive difficulties. One of the most common and frustrating manifestations of this is difficulty with concentration. The ability to focus for extended periods, to stay on task without being easily sidetracked, diminishes significantly. Imagine trying to read a book, listen to a lecture, or even hold a coherent conversation when your mind is constantly flitting between a myriad of thoughts, anxieties, and external stimuli. This isn't a lack of willpower, it's the nervous system's alarm bells ringing, making it difficult for the PFC to maintain a stable focus. External sounds that were once ignorable can become jarring distractions, and even internal dialogues can pull attention away from the present moment. This can lead to a feeling of being mentally scattered, unable to anchor one's thoughts or complete a task efficiently. The individual might reread the same sentence multiple times, find themselves zoning out during important meetings, or struggling to follow the thread of a discussion, leading to feelings of inadequacy and frustration. Memory, particularly working memory and short-term recall, is another casualty of cognitive fog. Working memory is the mental workspace where we hold and manipulate information temporarily, essential for tasks like following multi-step instructions, remembering a phone number long enough to dial it, or keeping track of multiple pieces of information in a conversation. When the PFC is under-resourced, this workspace becomes unstable. Information can easily slip through the cracks. This can manifest as forgetting appointments, misplacing items frequently, struggling to recall what someone just said, or having difficulty remembering the beginning of a sentence by the time you reach the end. This isn't selective amnesia. It's the brain's inability to hold onto and process information effectively due to the overload of the stress response. The constant undercurrent of anxiety or hypervigilance can also interfere with memory encoding, making it harder for new information to be stored in the first place. Decision-making becomes a Herculean task when cognitive fog sets in. The ability to weigh options, assess risks and benefits, and make a clear choice is severely hampered. The PFC's role in evaluating information and inhibiting impulsive choices is compromised. This can lead to indecisiveness, where even minor choices, like what to eat for lunch or which route to take, can feel overwhelming. Alternatively, it can lead to impulsive decisions, as the ability to pause and consider consequences is diminished. Individuals might find themselves stuck in a cycle of analysis paralysis, overthinking every possible outcome to the point of inaction, or conversely, making rash choices they later regret. This cognitive paralysis can extend to larger life decisions, creating a sense of stagnation and helplessness. The constant worry about making the wrong decision, amplified by the fog, can further exacerbate anxiety, creating a feedback loop where the very act of trying to decide becomes a source of stress. The feeling of being mentally scattered is a hallmark of cognitive fog. It's the sensation that one's thoughts are disorganized, fragmented, and difficult to bring into coherence. This can be experienced as a lack of mental clarity, a feeling of muddiness or fuzziness in one's thinking. It's as if the internal dialogue is disjointed, jumping from one topic to another without a logical connection. This can make it incredibly challenging to engage in structured thinking, whether it's planning a project, writing a coherent email, or simply organizing one's day. The mental energy required to maintain focus and coherence is so depleted that the mind feels like a jumbled collection of disconnected thoughts and anxieties. This can lead to a profound sense of frustration, as the individual feels their own mind is working against them, hindering their ability to function effectively in daily life. The impact of chronic stress and anxiety on the prefrontal cortex is not merely theoretical. It is supported by neurobiological evidence. Neuroimaging studies have shown that prolonged exposure to stress hormones can lead to structural changes in the PFC, including a reduction in gray matter volume and impaired connectivity between different brain regions. This neurobiological vulnerability explains why cognitive fog can be so persistent and pervasive. It's not a transient state of being tired, it's a symptom of a nervous system that has been in a prolonged state of alarm, fundamentally altering its optimal functioning. The constant state of sympathetic nervous system activation, often fueled by past trauma or ongoing stressors, effectively keeps the PFC in a state of shutdown or reduced capacity. For individuals experiencing this, everyday tasks can become arduous and draining. Simple activities that require sustained mental effort, like managing finances, organizing household chores, or engaging in complex work projects, can feel overwhelming and exhausting. The mental energy required to push through the fog and achieve clarity is immense, contributing to the pervasive fatigue that often accompanies this state. This can lead to a significant impact on professional life, relationships, and overall well-being. Work performance may suffer, leading to anxiety about job security. Social interactions can become strained as concentration falters and conversation becomes difficult. The ability to plan and execute personal goals can be severely compromised, leading to feelings of being stuck and a loss of agency. The frustration is often compounded by a lack of understanding from others, and sometimes even from oneself. Because cognitive fog is an internal experience, it's not as readily visible as physical pain or overt emotional distress. Friends, family, or colleagues might interpret the difficulties with concentration or memory as laziness, lack of interest, or even a sign of cognitive decline. This external judgment can amplify the internal distress, leading to self-criticism and a further erosion of self-esteem. The individual may internalize these judgments, believing they are fundamentally incapable or flawed, which can create a vicious cycle of anxiety and performance avoidance. It is crucial to recognize that cognitive fog is not a character flaw, but a physiological response to a dysregulated nervous system. Understanding this distinction is the first step towards healing. When we cease to blame ourselves and instead acknowledge that our cognitive difficulties are a signal from our nervous system that it is struggling to cope, we can begin to approach the issue with compassion and effective strategies. This involves creating conditions that allow the nervous system to shift out of its chronic stress response and into a more balanced state. This might involve practices that down-regulate the sympathetic nervous system, such as mindfulness meditation, deep breathing exercises, or gentle movement. It also involves identifying and addressing the underlying causes of the dysregulation, whether they stem from past trauma, chronic life stressors, or unsupportive environments. Furthermore, strategies that support cognitive function within the context of a dysregulated nervous system are invaluable. This includes breaking down complex tasks into smaller, manageable steps, externalizing memory by using calendars, to-do lists, and reminders, and creating a structured environment that minimizes distractions. It also means practicing self-compassion and accepting that periods of cognitive difficulty are a normal part of the healing process. Rather than pushing through the fog with brute force, which can often be counterproductive, the approach becomes one of gentle navigation, patience, and consistent self-care. By understanding the neurobiological underpinnings of cognitive fog and recognizing it as a legitimate sign of nervous system distress, individuals can begin to reclaim their mental clarity and cognitive resilience, moving from a state of bewilderment to one of empowerment and self-understanding. The journey back to clear thinking is a journey back to a regulated nervous system. The terrain of a dysregulated nervous system is rarely a calm, predictable landscape. While we've explored the cognitive fog that can shroud our thinking, an equally impactful and often more overt manifestation lies within our emotional world. These are the emotional tides, the unpredictable shifts in mood that can leave us feeling adrift, tossed about by forces beyond our apparent control. It's a common experience for those navigating the aftermath of trauma, chronic stress, or persistent anxiety, yet it's frequently misunderstood, dismissed as moodiness or a lack of emotional maturity. The reality is far more complex, deeply rooted in the intricate workings of our nervous system, particularly the ancient and powerful amygdala. The amygdala, a pair of almond-shaped structures nestled deep within the temporal lobes of our brain, serves as our internal alarm system. It is the primary hub for processing emotions, especially those related to threat and fear. In a healthy, regulated nervous system, the amygdala acts as a vigilant guardian, quickly assessing potential dangers and signaling the body to prepare for action, the classic fight, flight, or freeze response. Once the perceived threat has passed, the amygdala is designed to deactivate, allowing the nervous system to return to a state of calm. However, when the nervous system has been repeatedly exposed to overwhelming experiences, or has been in a prolonged state of stress, this delicate balance is disrupted. The amygdala can become hypersensitive, essentially stuck in an on position, or prone to overreacting to stimuli that a more regulated system would perceive as benign. This hyperactive amygdala is the engine behind many of the sudden and intense emotional shifts we experience. Imagine a finely tuned smoke detector that, due to a faulty sensor, goes off at the slightest whiff of toast, or even just a change in air pressure. This is analogous to what happens with a dysregulated amygdala. Minor triggers, often imperceptible to others, can set off a cascade of intense emotional responses. These can manifest as heightened reactivity, where everyday frustrations or minor inconveniences are met with an outsized emotional reaction, a flash of anger, overwhelming sadness, or profound anxiety. What might have once elicited a sigh or a fleeting moment of irritation can now trigger a full-blown emotional storm. This disproportionate response is not a reflection of a person's character. It is a direct consequence of an alarm system that is perpetually on high alert, misinterpreting neutral or even positive stimuli as potential threats. This heightened reactivity can make navigating social interactions particularly challenging. A simple misunderstanding in conversation, a perceived slight, or even just a change in someone's tone of voice can be enough to trigger a defensive response, overwhelming sadness, or a surge of anxiety. The individual might find themselves withdrawing, lashing out, or becoming visibly distressed, leaving themselves and others bewildered by the intensity of the reaction. This can lead to a cycle of social anxiety, where the fear of triggering such a response causes further avoidance, reinforcing the pattern. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The anticipation of an emotional outburst can contribute to the very dysregulation that makes it more likely. Beyond heightened reactivity, one of the most recognizable symptoms of emotional dysregulation is the experience of unpredictable mood swings. These aren't simply the ups and downs that everyone experiences. They are often abrupt, intense, and seemingly unprovoked shifts from one emotional extreme to another. One moment, an individual might feel relatively calm, perhaps even content. The next, they can be plunged into despair, overwhelmed by anxiety, or consumed by irritability. These shifts can occur rapidly, sometimes within minutes or hours, and can leave the person feeling confused and disoriented, as if they have no control over their internal state. These mood swings are not about a lack of willpower or a conscious choice to be emotional. They are the result of the nervous system struggling to maintain equilibrium. When the amygdala is overactive, it can trigger the release of stress hormones, which then influence other parts of the brain and body, leading to widespread physiological and emotional changes. The body's stress response, once initiated, can be difficult to switch off, and the rapid fluctuations in neurochemical activity can manifest as these dramatic shifts in mood. For instance, a sudden surge of adrenaline might lead to a feeling of intense anxiety or panic, followed by a crash of exhaustion and sadness as the body attempts to recover. This rapid cycling can be incredibly draining, both emotionally and physically. Irritability is another pervasive companion of emotional dysregulation. This isn't just a general grumpiness, it's a low-level simmering resentment, a constant sense of being on edge, where small annoyances can quickly escalate into explosive anger. Patience wears thin, and minor inconveniences feel like personal attacks. Conversations can become fraught with tension, as the individual is quicker to perceive criticism or disagreement. This can strain relationships, as loved ones may find themselves walking on eggshells, trying to avoid triggering an outburst. The underlying cause is often a nervous system that is perpetually in a state of defensiveness, with the 34 amygdala constantly scanning for threats, making it difficult to tolerate anything that feels like an imposition or a challenge. This chronic state of agitation can be exhausting for both the individual and those around them. It is crucial to understand that these intense emotional experiences are not a sign of weakness or a character flaw. They are signals from a nervous system that is working overtime to protect itself, albeit in a way that is no longer adaptive. The amygdala, in its attempt to keep the individual safe, has become overly sensitive. It's like a fire alarm that's so sensitive it goes off at the slightest puff of smoke, disrupting everything around it. Recognizing this underlying neurobiological mechanism is the first step towards cultivating self-compassion and developing effective coping strategies. Instead of berating oneself for feeling too much, or for reacting too strongly, the focus shifts to understanding the protective, albeit overactive, function of these emotional responses. In stark contrast to the heightened emotionality, Some individuals experiencing nervous system dysregulation may find themselves moving towards emotional numbness or a state of detachment. This is another facet of the amygdala's protective response. When the onslaught of emotions becomes too overwhelming, or when the individual has been exposed to extreme trauma, the nervous system may resort to shutting down as a survival mechanism. This is often referred to as dissociation, a state where one feels disconnected from their emotions, their body, or even reality itself. The intense feelings are too much to bear, so the system effectively numbs them, creating a buffer between the person and their emotional experience. This emotional numbness can feel like a persistent dullness, a lack of joy or pleasure, or an inability to connect with others on an emotional level. It can be accompanied by a sense of emptiness or a feeling that life is happening to someone else. The vibrancy of human experience is muted, leaving a flat, uninspiring existence. While this might seem like a reprieve from the intensity of emotional swings, it is also a profound form of suffering. It hinders connection, erodes a sense of self, and can lead to feelings of alienation and isolation. The amygdala, in this instance, is trying to protect the individual from further emotional pain by switching off the capacity to feel. This is a desperate measure taken by a system that believes it cannot cope with the intensity of its emotional world. The transition between these states, heightened reactivity, mood swings, irritability, and numbness, can also be a hallmark of dysregulation. A person might swing from feeling intensely angry about a minor issue to periods of profound sadness and despair, only to then feel completely detached and numb to everything. This unpredictability in the emotional experience itself can be incredibly unsettling. It makes it difficult to plan, to maintain relationships, or to simply feel grounded in one's own life. The internal compass seems to be spinning wildly, and the individual is left struggling to find a stable emotional bearing. Understanding the role of the amygdala in these emotional fluctuations is key. As the brain's primary threat detector, it is constantly scanning the environment for signs of danger. In a state of chronic stress or after trauma, the amygdala can become sensitized, meaning its threshold for detecting threats is lowered. It becomes quicker to sound the alarm, and the alarm bells ring louder and longer. This hypervigilance means that even neutral stimuli can be interpreted as threatening, triggering the body's stress response and leading to intense emotions. For example, a sudden loud noise that would normally cause a momentary startle reflex might, for a sensitized amygdala, trigger a full-blown panic attack or a surge of intense anger. The physiological cascade that follows an amygdala activation is also significant. The amygdala signals the hypothalamus, which in turn activates the sympathetic nervous system, SNS, and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, HPA, axis. This leads to the release of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. These hormones prepare the body for action by increasing heart rate, blood pressure, and respiration, and by diverting blood flow to the muscles. While this response is vital for survival in acute danger, its chronic activation due to a dysregulated amygdala leads to a state of persistent stress. The constant flooding of stress hormones can dysregulate other brain areas, including those involved in emotional regulation, further perpetuating the cycle of mood swings and emotional instability. Moreover, the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, PFC, plays a crucial role. The PFC, as we've discussed, is responsible for executive functions like impulse control, rational thought, and emotional regulation. In a healthy system, the PFC can exert a calming influence on the amygdala, helping to modulate emotional responses. However, when the nervous system is dysregulated, this inhibitory control from the PFC is weakened. The amygdala signals can overwhelm the PFC, making it difficult to think clearly, to regulate emotions, or to make reasoned decisions. This imbalance means that the body's primitive threat detection system is effectively running the show, leading to the exaggerated emotional responses we observe. The impact of these emotional tides on an individual's life can be profound. Relationships can suffer due to unpredictable outbursts or emotional withdrawal. Work performance can be affected by irritability, lack of focus, or the overwhelming nature of intense emotions. Social engagement can become difficult, leading to isolation and loneliness. The individual may begin to feel like they are living in a constant state of emotional crisis, struggling to find stability or a sense of inner peace. This can lead to a deep sense of shame and self-blame, as they grapple with emotions that feel alien and uncontrollable. It is within this context that recognizing these emotional shifts as signals, rather than character flaws, becomes paramount. When we understand that heightened reactivity, mood swings, irritability, or numbness are not personal failings but rather the language of a dysregulated nervous system trying to cope, we can begin to approach ourselves with compassion. This shift in perspective is transformative. It moves us away from self-criticism and towards understanding and healing. Instead of asking, "Why am I so emotional?" or "Why can't I just control myself?" the question becomes, "What is my nervous system trying to tell me right now?" This understanding opens the door to developing effective coping strategies. These strategies are not about suppressing emotions or forcing oneself to be calm, but about helping the nervous system to downregulate and find a more balanced state. Techniques that activate the parasympathetic nervous system, PNS, the body's rest and digest system, can be particularly helpful. These include deep, diaphragmatic breathing exercises, mindful self-compassion practices, gentle movement like yoga or tai chi, spending time in nature, and engaging in activities that bring a sense of calm and pleasure. The goal is to create experiences that signal safety to the nervous system, allowing the amygdala to gradually quiet down and the PFC to regain its regulatory influence. Furthermore, identifying triggers, both internal and external, that tend to provoke these emotional shifts is an important part of the process. This might involve keeping an emotional journal to track patterns, noticing what situations, thoughts, or interactions precede intense emotional states. Once triggers are identified, strategies can be developed to manage them. This might involve setting boundaries, practicing assertive communication, developing self-soothing techniques to use when triggered, or even reframing certain situations through a lens of compassion and understanding. For those experiencing emotional numbness or dissociation, the path to healing involves gently inviting the return of feeling. This often begins with grounding techniques that help to reconnect the individual with their body and the present moment. Practices that encourage interoception, the awareness of internal bodily sensations, can be particularly beneficial. Slowly and safely re-engaging with emotional experiences, perhaps through therapy or other supportive modalities, allows the nervous system to learn that it can, in fact, tolerate and process emotions without being overwhelmed. Ultimately, navigating the emotional tides of nervous system dysregulation is a journey of self-discovery and self-compassion. It requires patience, persistence, and a willingness to approach oneself with kindness. By understanding the neurobiological underpinnings of these emotional experiences, the hyperactive amygdala, the compromised PFC, the cascade of stress hormones, we can begin to disentangle ourselves from self-blame. We can start to see these powerful emotions not as adversaries, but as messengers from a system that has been through a great deal and is doing its best to navigate the world. With this compassionate understanding and the implementation of supportive strategies, it is possible to find a more stable and resilient emotional landscape, one where the tides are gentler, and the individual can find a greater sense of peace and agency within their own emotional world. The intricate dance of human connection is profoundly influenced by the state of our nervous system. When dysregulation takes hold, it doesn't merely affect our internal world of emotions and thoughts. It ripples outward, shaping how we engage with others and how we communicate. This subsection delves into the subtle yet significant ways that nervous system dysregulation can lead to a breakdown in social connection, primarily through communication barriers. One of the most common ways dysregulation impacts our ability to connect is through difficulty in expressing our needs and feelings authentically. When the nervous system is in a state of hyperarousal, a state of chronic fight-or-flight readiness, the dominant instinct is self-protection. This can translate into a reluctance to be vulnerable, as vulnerability might be perceived as a weakness or an opening for further threat. Consequently, individuals may struggle to articulate what they need, whether it's a simple request for help, a boundary, or an expression of affection. Instead of clear communication, there might be hints, passive-aggressive remarks, or simply a silence that leaves others guessing. This inability to voice needs directly stems from a nervous system that is on high alert, prioritizing safety over authentic connection, which paradoxically can lead to the very isolation it's trying to avoid. Conversely, when the nervous system is in a shutdown or hypoaroused state, the impact on communication is different but equally detrimental. In this state, individuals may feel disconnected from their own emotions and from others, leading to a perceived lack of engagement or an inability to respond appropriately. They might appear apathetic, withdrawn, or detached, making it difficult for others to gauge their internal experience or to initiate meaningful interaction. The drive to connect is present, but the capacity to express it is diminished. This can result in a feeling of being unheard or misunderstood, even when attempting to communicate. The energy required to bridge the gap between an internally shut down state and the external world of social interaction can feel insurmountable, leading to a retreat from social engagement altogether. Interpreting social cues, a fundamental aspect of smooth interpersonal interactions, can also become severely impaired by nervous system dysregulation. When the amygdala is hypersensitive, it's constantly scanning for threats. This hypervigilance can lead to misinterpreting neutral or even positive social cues as negative. A slight frown might be perceived as anger, a moment of silence as rejection, or a casual remark as a personal attack. This overestimation of threat can trigger defensive responses, leading to conflict or withdrawal, even when no real threat exists. The individual's nervous system is essentially providing a distorted lens through which social interactions are filtered, making authentic connection incredibly challenging. The impact of this misinterpretation can be particularly devastating in close relationships. A partner might express a concern that, to a regulated nervous system, is an invitation for discussion and problem-solving. However, to a dysregulated system, it might be perceived as criticism or an accusation, leading to an immediate defensive posture, anger, or a complete shutdown. This pattern can create a cycle of misunderstanding and conflict, where intentions are constantly misread and genuine attempts at connection are met with unintended negative reactions. Over time, this erodes trust and intimacy, leaving both individuals feeling frustrated and alone. Social settings, especially those that are unfamiliar or involve a large number of people, can become overwhelming for individuals with a dysregulated nervous system. The sheer volume of sensory input, sights, sounds, conversations, can trigger a state of overwhelm. The nervous system, already struggling to maintain equilibrium, can become flooded, leading to a desperate need to escape the situation. This often manifests as social withdrawal. The individual might avoid social gatherings altogether, or if they attend, they may appear disengaged, quiet, and eager to leave. This withdrawal is not a sign of disinterest but rather a survival mechanism, a desperate attempt by the nervous system to regain a sense of safety and control. This pattern of overwhelm and withdrawal can lead to profound feelings of isolation. The individual may witness others effortlessly navigating social landscapes, deepening their sense of being different or fundamentally flawed. They might yearn for connection but feel incapable of achieving it, further reinforcing a belief that they are inherently unlovable or socially inept. This sense of isolation can become a self-perpetuating cycle, as the lack of social engagement reduces opportunities for practicing social skills and for experiencing positive social interactions that could help to regulate the nervous system. Conflict resolution is another area severely impacted by nervous system dysregulation. When under stress or threat, our capacity for rational thought and nuanced communication diminishes. For someone whose nervous system is already dysregulated, even minor disagreements can escalate rapidly. The activation of the fight-or-flight response means that the individual might become overly aggressive, argumentative, or accusatory, struggling to hear the other person's perspective or to find common ground. Conversely, the freeze response can lead to an inability to articulate their point of view, to stand up for themselves, or to de-escalate the situation, resulting in passive acquiescence or complete stonewalling. This inability to navigate conflict constructively can lead to relationships fracturing and opportunities being missed. In professional settings, it can hinder teamwork and career progression. In personal relationships, it can lead to a constant state of tension or the avoidance of any situation that might lead to disagreement, thus preventing deeper intimacy and mutual understanding. The breakdown in communication during conflict is not necessarily a reflection of a lack of desire for resolution, but a symptom of a nervous system that is struggling to operate within the parameters of regulated emotional and cognitive processing. The underlying mechanism for these communication breakdowns is deeply rooted in how the nervous system manages threat and safety. When the nervous system perceives a threat, whether it's a genuine danger or a misinterpreted social cue, it prioritizes survival over connection. This means that higher-level brain functions, such as those involved in empathy, understanding, and nuanced communication, can be temporarily overridden by more primitive survival responses. The amygdala, acting as the brain's threat detector, can hijack the system, leading to a focus on self-preservation that makes it difficult to engage in the give and take of authentic communication. Furthermore, the physiological changes associated with nervous system dysregulation, such as increased heart rate, muscle tension, and shallow breathing, can further impede communication. These physical manifestations of stress can make it difficult to speak clearly, to maintain eye contact, or to project a sense of calm and openness, all of which are crucial for effective social interaction. The body is essentially sending signals of distress that are often picked up by others, consciously or unconsciously, contributing to misunderstandings or a sense of unease in the interaction. The challenge, then, is to recognize these communication patterns not as personal failings but as outward manifestations of an internal nervous system state. It's about understanding that when someone struggles to express their needs, misinterprets social cues, withdraws from social situations, or reacts intensely to conflict, it is often a sign that their nervous system is dysregulated and struggling to find a sense of safety and balance. This understanding is the first step towards cultivating compassion, both for oneself and for others who may be exhibiting these signs. The journey towards improved social connection and communication in the context of nervous system dysregulation involves developing strategies that help to regulate the nervous system itself. Practices that promote a sense of safety and calm, such as mindfulness, deep breathing exercises, and gentle movement, can create the internal conditions necessary for more effective communication. When the nervous system is less activated, the capacity for empathy, clear thinking, and authentic expression begins to return. Moreover, learning to identify personal triggers for dysregulation is crucial. This might involve recognizing certain social situations, types of interactions, or even internal thought patterns that tend to push the nervous system into a state of overwhelm or shutdown. Once identified, strategies can be put in place to manage these triggers, such as setting boundaries, taking breaks when needed, or practicing self-soothing techniques before or during challenging social engagements. In therapeutic settings, techniques like polyvagal theory-informed therapy, somatic experiencing, or EMDR can be particularly effective in helping individuals to process past experiences that may have contributed to nervous system dysregulation. By gently and safely revisiting and processing traumatic memories, the nervous system can begin to update its threat detection system, recalibrating its responses to be more adaptive. This allows for a greater capacity to engage with the world and with others from a place of greater safety and connection. Ultimately, overcoming the social disconnect caused by communication breakdowns requires a multifaceted approach. It involves self-awareness to recognize the signs of dysregulation, self-compassion to approach these challenges with kindness, and the implementation of strategies that support nervous system regulation. By fostering a greater understanding of the intricate interplay between our internal state and our external interactions, we can begin to bridge the gaps that nervous system dysregulation creates, paving the way for more authentic, meaningful, and connected relationships. The silence of withdrawal or the sharp edges of conflict are not indicators of an unfixable social deficit, but rather the cries of a nervous system seeking to navigate a world that feels overwhelming and a profound, albeit often masked, longing for connection. The persistent, unyielding fog of fatigue can be one of the most insidious and demoralizing manifestations of a dysregulated nervous system. It's a weariness that sleep rarely touches, a profound exhaustion that permeates every fiber of one's being, extending far beyond the realm of simple tiredness. This isn't the pleasant languor after a day of vigorous activity, nor the sleepiness that descends after a good meal. Instead, it's a heavy cloak that settles upon the individual, muffling their capacity for engagement with the world and even with themselves. This deep-seated depletion stems from the nervous system's prolonged engagement in a state of hypervigilance, a constant, low-grade activation of the fight-flight-freeze response. When the body and brain are perpetually on alert, scanning for threats, preparing for action, or bracing for impact, they are expending an enormous amount of energy. This is not an energy that can be easily replenished by a few extra hours in bed. It is a fundamental draining of vital resources, leaving an individual feeling like a battery that has been run dry, with no apparent way to recharge. Consider the biological imperative behind this energy drain. When the sympathetic nervous system is chronically activated, it triggers a cascade of physiological responses designed for immediate survival. Adrenaline and cortisol flood the system, heart rate increases, muscles tense, and digestion slows down, all in preparation for a perceived threat. While these responses are life-saving in acute danger, their prolonged activation is incredibly taxing. Imagine a car engine that is constantly revving at high RPMs without ever reaching its destination. The wear and tear on the engine would be immense, and it would eventually break down. The human body, in a state of chronic dysregulation, experiences a similar, albeit more complex, degradation. The constant internal alarm system, the ceaseless vigilance, consumes fuel at an unsustainable rate. This leaves little energy reserves for other essential bodily functions, let alone for the demands of daily life, personal pursuits, or meaningful social interaction. This pervasive fatigue is often accompanied by a profound and disheartening lack of motivation. Activities that once brought joy, curiosity, or a sense of purpose can suddenly feel like insurmountable obstacles. The thought of starting a project, engaging in a hobby, or even fulfilling basic daily responsibilities can evoke a feeling of overwhelming inertia. This isn't laziness. It's a symptom of a nervous system that is too depleted and too preoccupied with self-preservation to muster the energy for engagement and exploration. The very mechanisms that drive us to seek out new experiences, to learn, and to grow are dampened by the overriding need to conserve what little energy remains. The spark of initiative is extinguished, replaced by a dull ache of apathy. This diminished drive can be particularly distressing because it often clashes with an individual's internal desires. There might be a deep yearning to be productive, to connect with loved ones, or to engage in activities that were once fulfilling. However, the physical and mental exhaustion makes these desires feel utterly unattainable. The gap between what one wants to do and what one feels capable of doing can create a significant internal conflict, leading to feelings of frustration, self-recrimination, and a deepening sense of despair. The individual may feel trapped, caught between their inner aspirations and the overwhelming reality of their depleted state. Furthermore, this chronic fatigue and lack of motivation can create a vicious cycle. The very absence of energy and drive makes it difficult to engage in activities that could potentially help regulate the nervous system. For example, gentle exercise, spending time in nature, or engaging in creative pursuits are often recommended for stress reduction and energy restoration. However, when one is experiencing profound fatigue and a lack of motivation, the prospect of initiating these activities can feel overwhelming. The thought of having to try to feel better can itself be exhausting. This can lead to a sense of helplessness, as the very remedies that might offer relief seem out of reach. The individual may feel stuck in a loop of exhaustion and inactivity, further reinforcing the dysregulation. It is crucial to differentiate this trauma-induced fatigue from ordinary tiredness. Ordinary tiredness is a signal that the body needs rest, and a period of rest is usually sufficient to restore energy levels. Trauma-related fatigue, however, is a deep, systemic depletion. It is the result of the nervous system being in a constant state of alert for an extended period. This prolonged activation, even at a subperceptual level, can exhaust the body's resources. The allostatic load, the cumulative wear and tear on the body from chronic stress, becomes immense. The system is not simply tired, it is depleted. It's akin to a computer that has been running multiple complex programs simultaneously for days without a reboot. Eventually, its processing power will dwindle, it will slow down, and it may even crash. The nervous system, similarly, when pushed beyond its capacity for sustained activation, enters a state of profound exhaustion. The lack of motivation that accompanies this fatigue is not a moral failing. It is a direct consequence of the nervous system prioritizing survival over flourishing. When the body perceives a constant underlying threat, its energy resources are diverted to managing that perceived threat. There is simply not enough energy left to engage in activities that are not directly related to safety and survival. This can manifest as difficulty concentrating, a reduced ability to experience pleasure, anhedonia, and a general sense of flatness or emotional blunting. The world can seem muted, colors less vibrant, and experiences less impactful. This is because the nervous system, in its effort to protect itself, has scaled back its engagement with the external world. The concept of running on empty takes on a visceral reality for those experiencing chronic nervous system dysregulation. It's the feeling of going through the motions, of functioning at a fraction of one's capacity. Even simple tasks can require immense mental effort. The cognitive resources that would normally be available for problem-solving, planning, or creative thinking are consumed by the constant effort of maintaining a semblance of equilibrium. This can lead to a feeling of being constantly overwhelmed, even by minor challenges. The internal demand on the nervous system is so high that any external demand, no matter how small, can feel like too much. Moreover, the social and emotional implications of this energy drain are significant. The lack of motivation can lead to social withdrawal, as the effort required to interact with others feels too great. This can strain relationships, as loved ones may misinterpret the fatigue and lack of engagement as disinterest or a lack of care. The individual may feel isolated and misunderstood, further exacerbating their distress. The inability to participate in activities that foster connection and joy can lead to a deepening sense of loneliness and a diminished quality of life. The energy required to maintain social bonds, to engage in shared experiences, and to offer support to others is simply not available when the fundamental energy reserves are depleted. Understanding that this profound fatigue and lack of motivation are symptoms of nervous system dysregulation is a crucial step towards healing. It shifts the narrative from one of personal failing to one of physiological response. This understanding allows for compassion and patience with oneself. Instead of berating oneself for a lack of energy or drive, one can begin to focus on strategies that support nervous system regulation. This might involve gentle, low-demand activities, prioritizing rest and self-care, and gradually reintroducing activities that nourish the system when capacity allows. The goal is not to push through the fatigue, which can be counterproductive and further deplete resources, but to create conditions that allow the nervous system to gradually restore its reserves and return to a state of greater balance. This journey back to a state of sufficient energy and restored motivation is often a slow and incremental process. It requires patience and a willingness to listen to the body's signals. It involves acknowledging the profound toll that chronic stress and dysregulation have taken. Rather than viewing the exhaustion as a personal deficit, it's vital to see it as a testament to the body's resilience in the face of prolonged adversity. The energy has been spent on survival, and now, with appropriate support and regulation, it can begin to be reallocated towards living, thriving, and engaging with the world with renewed vigor. The goal is not to return to a pre-dysregulation baseline overnight, but to cultivate a sustainable rhythm of rest, nourishment, and regulated activity that allows for a gradual rebuilding of vital energy and a reawakening of the drive to engage with life.